Good morning. Hope you all are doing well. I'm sitting here in Brooklyn. It's a lovely Saturday morning, just sort of listening to the birds chirp, and my my window looks out onto the street. So it's a nice, peaceful morning watching people walking by. I was thinking about recently a friend of mine who's a choreographer asked to use one of my songs called El Jardinero. She wanted to choreograph a piece to that song. And that song, El Jardinero, was the first song that I ever wrote in Spanish. Actually, it's the only song I've ever written in Spanish. But I have others that I'm working on anyway. Um, and it made me think about the role of music from other countries in my life. I was born in Michigan, and in the 70s, in 1970, and I am definitely a product of the music of the day. So Sesame Street, um, Free to Be You and Me, Elton John, the Bee Gees, all that good 70s music, Queen. I would say the song Killer Queen, to me, I can still see there was a moment, must have been, I don't know, 1975. I was in our front yard in St. Joe, Michigan, and I could see our neighbor, who I perceived as a teenager, washing the car with a hose. It's the summertime, and that song is just in my head. Like, that crystallizes like the 70s for me. But accompanying that, accompanying that sort of foundation that I have in music, my dad was always playing mariachi music and flamenco music and classical music. And then he was an international traveler, uh, and I think he was a music fan in general, but I think he also felt that listening to music from other countries was part of his sort of work requirement, because he would want to be able to talk with clients about music and culture and things like that. So he listened to a lot of French music, Jacques Brel. I remember he brought home like an album of Russian songs, Japanese music. There was always this kind of international thing happening uh, with music. And fast forward, um, when I was an undergrad, I eventually wound up at Connecticut College in New London. And they had this really cool music library. Um, it was, you know, it was a beautiful library room, and you, they had a really cool record collection. I guess there was somebody had donated their record collection, but they also had, they just had a vast selection. And so at some point, I don't know what started this for me, but I was in the music library and I got turned on to Folkways records. And Folkways, the concept was you have some kind of music what is it called? Ethnographer, ethnographer, I think it is. Somebody would go to Peru, to the countryside, and they would have a tape recorder and microphones, and they would document these performances. And I don't know, I don't remember what it was that got me into that, but I I would put on those. I would go to the music library, Connecticut College, and look for a record that was something like the music of Peru, and I would put it on and I would listen to it. And I don't know, it just, I know I was looking for that kind of spark, that jolt, like when you put on a certain something or other. Um, and I just had these different touch points. Like back then, like I was really interested in music from Cambodia. I had heard gamelan, and I was just like, oh. And Peru, I loved Andean music. Eventually, this led me to like music of the Caribbean, um, music from Bali, um, music from, well, another record that I discovered back then was this, and now it's funny, it's this record is so popular now, is Le Voix Mystérieuse, the Voices of Bulgaria. It's a women's choir, and the harmonies are just so intense and beautiful. So my point is, um, I just kept doing these deep dives into music from different cultures. Um, the other thing that became super, super important after Connecticut College was um, there was a used to be a record store in Manhattan called Other Music, and it wasn't just Other Music; it was also Tower Records and HMV. I would go to that world music section. In fact, the first CD I ever bought, and this was a big deal for me. I guess this was somewhere around 1989, when the movie The Last Temptation of Christ came out. Peter Gabriel did the soundtrack. I don't know the history of this, but he started a record label called Realworld, I believe, and he did the soundtrack for Last Temptation of Christ. But it was a very sort of Middle Eastern. I haven't watched that movie since it came out, but it had a certain feel to it, like a very Middle Eastern feel, not something that, it wasn't sort of like a, oh Jesus, with like harps and things like that, or even orchestra, like a regular Western orchestra. It had this Middle Eastern feel to it, and Peter Gabriel did that. So I had bought the cassette tape of Peter Gabriel's music, but he released another album called Passion Sources, which was the field recordings of music that really influenced him to make his own Middle Eastern sounding music. That was Passion Sources, Peter Gabriel's Real World Records Passion Sources, which were these kind of field recordings, was the first CD that I ever bought. And man, that it just took me again on a trip, like just opened up all this stuff for my imagination. So, the subject of today's talk, listening to music from other countries is just so powerful. So I've got my Folkways records, Nonesuch Explorer series, which I highly recommend. Nonesuch, Folkways. And, in my days as a record collector, I don't buy records anymore. But I used to just always go to the World Music Bin and just always on the hunt for that record that was going to be like a field recording that was going to unlock some passionate uh, performance from another country. So the record that influenced me that I was really thinking about quite a bit for El Jardinero was a Folkways record called, I think it's called The Music of Bolivia. It was an EP, it wasn't a full record, and there are a couple songs on there that just have this beautiful vibe to them. Piano, percussion, the sort of the beautiful voices. Um, it's well worth. I'm trying to remember the name of the song in particular. Um, I think it's called Mirasa. No, I don't know. I can't think of it. Anyway, Folkways Music of Bolivia. It's on YouTube. Check it out. Maybe it's called Songs and Dances of Bolivia. Anyway, um, please post in the comments some of your favorite world music. I mean, it's kind of funny that it's called world music, right? Because it's like there's the United States, there's American music, and then there's the rest of the world. But anyway, uh, other countries whose music that you particularly love, I would love to hear your stories about that. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Have a great Saturday. I'll talk to you soon.